Hi everyone, today we're solving October-November 2020. Paper is 3 and variant is 2. So let's get started. In the first question, they're asking us what is necessary to achieve Pareto efficiency. Now, if you're saying necessary to achieve, which means we haven't achieved as yet, right? So in that context, the answer will be C, which says one person must benefit without anyone else being worse off. If that is the case, then we are achieving it. But if you're already Pareto efficient, we normally say that one person must benefit uh, without, must not benefit if this was something where we have already achieved it. So remember, Pareto efficiency is both economic. Is economic efficiency, which means both allocative and productive efficiency is achieved. We normally say that if you are Pareto efficient, then it is not possible for us for one person to benefit without somebody else being worse off, right? So if you want to make someone better off, you need to make somebody else worse off, which means you are already Pareto efficient. However, if you are achieving Pareto efficiency, then let's say the gain in person A would mean that he is benefiting without somebody else being worse off, because we are not as yet Pareto efficient. Another way to look at this is through PPC. So if you look at PPC, for example, let's say if you're at A, right, and you go to B, being on the PPC, when you go from A to B, when I get more of X, I get less of Y. Isn't that true? So more of X would mean less of Y. But if you were not efficient to begin with, and let's say you were at point C, going from C to B would mean more of X, but the same of Y, which means that we are not losing anything of Y, but we get more of X, which means we are becoming more efficient. So something similar is happening here, because the question is saying achieve Pareto efficiency. This means one person must benefit without somebody else being worse off. So you benefit and somebody else does not become worse off because you were not Pareto efficient to begin with. In the next question, they're saying a local council is considering building a passenger terminal at a port so that it can benefit the large cruise ships that dock there. It undertakes a cost benefit analysis. Remember, cost benefit analysis is simply looking at all costs, both external costs and the private costs, to figure out the social cost, and then looking at all the external private benefits and private benefits to look at social benefit. And if social cost is equal to social benefit, then you're basically indifferent. But if social cost is greater than social benefit of a project, you may not undertake it. But if social cost is less than social benefit, you might undertake the project. Now, when you look at cost benefit analysis, it is because it is taking sort of into account the external cost and external benefit, it is elaborate and it should be taken for any public project. Now, what would be included as an external cost in the local council's cost benefit analysis? So external cost would mean third party costs, and the answer for this one is basically D, the cost of fishing fleet of reallocating to another port. Because they are building a passenger terminal at a port, this means that fishing might not take place in that port anymore, which would mean they need to find another port, which means it's a third party cost, because they are the people affected and not directly linked with this passenger terminal board. Let's look at other choices as well for us to have a clarity. The cost of a ticket for a passenger is a private cost. The cost of fuel to operate the cruise ship, which is the passenger, which will come in the passenger terminal, again is a private cost. The cost paid by cruise ships when they dock at the port is again a private cost, which will be a benefit to the port, of course. So D is the right answer, which is the external cost, which is basically some people will have to pay for it because this is the cost of sort of allocation. This is the cost of external cost, which is going to be third party cost. Okay, moving on. So this is another question which is from the chapter government intervention or market failure. The expected marginal benefit, MPB, marginal social cost, MSB, marginal private cost, is all given here, and they're saying they're building a new road the government intervenes so that the socially desirable output is achieved. Remember, socially desirable output will be where MSC is equal to MSB, right? While the private outcome will be MPC is equal to MPP. If it was left to market forces of demand and supply, this is going to be your supply, this is going to be your demand. But this is a socially desirable demand, this is a socially desirable supply. If market forces of demand supply without government intervention were making it, where demand will be equal to supply, so you will make Q3. However, if the government gets into it and try to sort of find out the socially desirable sort of output level, they will go for this point, which is Q2, where MSB is equal to MSC, right? So you will be at, for example, Q3, and then you will move to Q2, which means the answer will be B in this case. The next question, guys, is number 4. A rational consumer chooses what quantities of two products Y and Z to purchase with a given income. MUY and MUZ are the additions to the total utility. So simply the formula is, whenever you're looking at consumer equilibrium, MU of Y over price of Y must be equal to MU of Z over price of Z. This is called the equimarginal principle, and in this case they have rewritten this, so MUY times P Z. If you bring this on this side and if you bring that to the other side, your answer will be C in this case. Moving on, number 5. In the fifth question, they're saying that diagram shows the consumer's indifference curve and budget lines for an inferior good and a normal good. Which diagram shows the effect of a cut in income tax? When there's a cut in income tax, by the way, there will be a rise in income. Isn't that true? A rise in income basically would mean that the demand for normal goods will go up. So normal goods quantity will go up. For inferior goods, the quantity will go down. Isn't that true? So first of all, we need to look at where the budget line is shifting to the right in a parallel manner, because this is the rise in income. So only A and B are the right answers in that context. Then look at inferior goods. Are we buying more of inferior goods or are we buying less of inferior goods? We should buy less of inferior goods. So if I'm at A, I should be at B, because like you're buying less of inferior goods. And also, I should say, let's call it X1 and X2 for simplicity. So you were buying X1 and now you're going to buy X2. But at the same time, because income is going up, so you're buying more of normal goods. So Y1 and Y2. So that's why the answer will be moving from, let's say, point F to G. So which means A is the right answer. So guys, remember this is a rise in income, that's why there's a parallel shift, that's why C and D are wrong. And then we look at, are we buying more of normal goods and less of inferior good or not, and that's why A is the right answer. In number 6, they say, what is marginal cost? Remember, marginal cost is the cost of producing one extra unit. It's the difference between total cost of producing the n units and n minus 1 units. So this is very simple. It's simply change in total cost over change in quantity. So that's why the right answer is A. For number 7, they're saying the table shows the production and total cost of a firm. What is the average variable cost? So the trick to doing these questions, guys, is simply first look at what is the fixed cost, and the way to find out fixed cost is that at 0 production you still have a cost which is 20, which is my fixed cost, which means that I need to subtract fixed cost from my 5th unit. So if I subtract 20, I will be left with 30. This 30 is my variable cost. Now 30 divided by 5 is going to be 6. Why? Because they are asking us the average variable cost. So total variable cost is 30, total fixed cost is 20, fixed cost is plus variable cost makes up this 50, and therefore 30 divided by 5 will give me average variable cost, which is 6. In number 8, guys, the way we solve this question is basically whenever you're giving your cost curve, which is coming from the y-axis, and you have to find out the minimum point, right? You need to draw a line that is tangent to the curve, okay? Tangent to the curve, but starting from the, let me just tell you, starting from the from the origin. Now, guys, whenever you make a line to the curve, like for example, I make this line or that line or this line, or like this will tell me the slope, because remember slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's say I choose the minimum point here, right? Now look at what is happening here. At this minimum point here, this is my change in y over change in x. So this in turn will tell me the slope at this point. The slope at this point, you would agree with me, is going to be the minimum, because this is probably the most flattest line I can draw, because there's no other line that can touch the curve and yet be coming from the origin, because and yet be flatter, because this is probably the last time this line can touch. Because if I draw any other line, for example, like this one, they're not touching the curve. So by making a line that is tangent to the curve coming from origin, you can find the slope, and this is also the minimum point of the long run total cost curve. So if you look at this, the minimum point where LRAC is going to be, minimum will be at point Y. Make sense? If this question, by the way, was asking us where is your marginal cost minimum, the answer will be here, where the curve is changing its sort of slope, because right now it's increasing at a decreasing rate, then it is increasing at an increasing rate. So this is the point where the marginal cost will be minimum, and this is the point where the average cost will be minimum. In number 9, this is which combination of statements about small firms and large firms is correct. So remember, small firms are those which are not common in manufacturing, probably more in services, so that's why A is wrong. Are more numerous than large firms, possible, but do not experience. But large firms, they're saying, do not experience economies of scale. Large firms do experience economies of scale, so that's why this is wrong. Can do well when each item produced must be different. That's true for small firms. Variety is a reason why small firms survive, but may arise when internal growth or merger happens. That's also true. So C is the right answer. Cannot have monopoly power may be true, but cannot earn supernormal profits. Large firms can earn supernormal profits. That's why D is wrong. So C is the right answer in this case. In number 10, they say, why might the long-run equilibrium of a profit-maximizing firm in a monopolistically competitive market differ from its short-run equilibrium? So, normally we say that the monopolistically competitive market may have the similar kind of a short-run, long-run equilibrium, but the reason why it might be different is because of low barriers to entry, which happens because the only way we distinguish between the perfect competition and monopoly is this, that in perfect competition and monopolistic competition is this, that they have what we call differentiated product in monopolistically competitive market, but that may not be true for perfect competition, which has identical product, but both have low barriers to entry, and because of low barriers to entry, both end up making normal profit in the long run. And that's why B is the right answer. Now guys, do not mix monopolistically competitive market with monopoly, because monopoly doesn't have barriers, they have strong barriers to entry, and monopolistically competitive have low or no barriers to entry. Okay, number 11. I can also look at, by the way, I can also look at other options. Advertising expenditure is possible. That's probably true, but that's not the reason why the long run and short run will be differing. Innovation reduces the monopoly power of firms. We are talking about monopolistic competitive, so that's not true. So B is the best answer in this case. Number 11. The diagram shows the cost and revenue of a monopolist. What would be the aim of the firm if it chooses to produce Q1? Now at Q1, MR is equal to 0. When MR is 0, remember this guys, that when MR is 0, this is how total revenue looks like. It's my total revenue. So this is the point where MR will be 0, which means total revenue will be maximum. So revenue maximization, that's Q1. From a diagram for demand curve, just to draw it for revision, this is my where MR is 0, right? The point is Q1, which is corresponding, and this is my demand curve. So the point where MR is 0, TR is maximum. So remember that. So that's why A is the right answer. What does the king demand curve model suggest about the equilibrium price in an oligopoly market? So remember, king demand curve means that the prices are stable. Why are the prices stable? Because firms are not willing to change their prices much because of the uncertainty that price change may entail. The prices may remain the same, and that's why A is the right answer. It will be stable because there is little incentive for firms to change price. The king demand curve therefore means there is what we call price stickiness, which basically means stable prices and unwillingness of firms to change price that often. What is the central feature of a nudge theory, guys? Nudge theory is basically the idea where the government can basically persuade or convince people through various ways to end up doing something which is socially desirable. So for example, if I want to make people eat healthy food, I may want to put that healthy food in the front counter and put unhealthy food a little further away, which naturally would lead people out of convenience to end up eating the healthy food and ignore the unhealthy food. So that's basically nudging people to end up taking good decisions, which is called the idea of persuasion. What indicates that a more equal distribution of income has been achieved? Now, more equal distribution of income basically means that we are looking at, like if you look at distribution of income, this is C is the right answer. Remember, the lower the Gini coefficient, the more equal the distribution. So we make our curve, and remember Gini coefficient, the smaller this is area is going to be, let's call this area sort of A. So this is my area A is the blue versus this area, which is in green, right? So this area is in green, and we find out this area A over this area B, right? And we say A over B is telling us the distribution of income. Now, the closer a country, this is a curve for a country's Lorentz curve for a country, the closer you are to the line, this line, which is basically telling us equal distribution, the more equal the distribution will be, because the numerator is going to be smaller than denominator. Let's say if you draw a country like Pakistan, for example, this is going to be, let me choose another color, this is going to be like somewhere here. So the distribution of income is more unfair, and that would mean area A will be much larger as compared to area B. So that's why the lower Gini coefficient is the right answer. So what indicates that a more equal distribution of income has been achieved? A lower Gini. Economic growth actually leads to more unequal distribution. Higher human development index may not also be directly telling us distribution of income as compared to Gini coefficient, which actually tells us distribution of income with as compared to our population. Lower tax to GDP ratio again isn't a distribution measure. C is a direct distribution measure. So that's why lower Gini coefficient is the right answer. Now in 15 they say which combination of policies most likely to reduce the number of low paid workers caught in the poverty trap. Remember, poverty trap is when your after tax salary is lower than your unemployment benefits that you get. So they're saying which combination of policies is most likely to reduce the number of low paid workers caught in the poverty trap. So you basically want more people to be not getting affected through poverty trap. So one way you do that is basically for individuals tax-free allowance that you are looking at, you need to basically increase it. Why do you want to increase it? Because if, for example, I'm taxed $10 and that makes me worse off than somebody else who is, so let me give you an example. Let's say I earn 100 and the government puts a tax on me and I get 90. If I was not working, let's say my unemployment benefit was, let's say, 95. So how do I make this guy better off? First, I'll give him tax-free allowance, which means I should remove this, and so I should give him 100. So you should increase his allowance for income, tax-free allowance for income tax, which means you should not tax him if he's super low in terms of his income. Secondly, what you need to do is that national minimum wage in real terms. So the minimum wage in real terms would basically means you should pay people very high on a minimum wage, because those are the people very likely to be earning the lowest possible income and falling in poverty trap. So you should increase that too. If you increase that, then this 100 might become, for example, 120, and you can help them not going into the poverty trap, where the unemployment benefits are more comfortable than the after tax salary. In number 16, guys, the diagram shows the effect of the introduction of a national minimum wage, WM, in an occupation where workers are employed by profit maximizing monopsonists. So monopsonist will pay you where MC is equal to MRP. He will pay you at this point. Let's call this point A, and he will pay for W1 wage, because this is where the supply is your, remember, wage rate. This is what he's going to pay for Q1 workers, which means this OW1 XQ1 is what you will be paid. Then, guys, what is happening is this, that beyond as soon as you introduce minimum wage, the wage will become WM, right? This will become the wage, minimum wage, and then more can be paid depending on supplies. So the new supply curve will become WMUSL. The new marginal cost will be, remember, when the supply curve is perfectly elastic, will be also elastic, right? And then we'll make a dotted line up. The rest of the marginal cost will be here. So MC is equal to MRP, therefore will now happen at this point. Let's just label it to be M, okay? M for minimum wage. So M, right? Which means Q3 workers will be employed and they will be paid WM. So guys, the new wage will be, total wage will be OWM UQ3. So this phrase means the right answer will be, you will be paying, or the wage will be increasing from OW1 XQ1, which is this one, to OWM UQ3. So there is an increase, of course, because the minimum wage is being put, and the right answer will be D in this case. Now, in the number 17, they say a backward bending supply of labor is one where beyond a certain point, the supply of labor, remember, backward bending a supply curve looks like this. This is this. We say this beyond some point W, let's say X, the workers will decide to work lesser when the wage rate goes up, and that's because the substitution effect is less than income effect. In this case, substitution effect is greater than income effect, right? So beyond a certain point, the supply of labor decreases as wage rate goes up. So decreases as wage rate goes up. So C is the right answer for number 17. In number 18, this says the table shows the factors that influence living standards. Which country would be most likely to have the lowest human development index? Remember, human development index is looking at three things. It's looking at life expectancy at birth, infant mortality rate, and GNI per capita. So look at this. The infant mortality rate is the highest for country D. Also, life expectancy at birth, which means like how long you survive, is the lowest for country D. And also GNP or GNI per capita is also the lowest. So we're looking at the lowest human development index would be D, country D, and these two are basically given to confuse us. So mean days of schooling and homicide basically are not relevant. Okay, moving on, guys. The table provides data on the GNI, gross national income, and the foreign aid expenditure of selected countries. So we are given with some rich countries: Belgium, Germany, Sweden, and South Korea. They have given us GNI and they have given us foreign aid expenditure. So the aid that is basically uh, being given by these countries, because they are expenditure, so they're giving this kind of expenditure. What can be concluded from the table? Let's read each. Countries with a higher GNI always spend more on foreign aid. Well, if that's the case, like Germany, of course, has the highest. But then you look at second highest is South Korea. They have not the highest because Sweden is exceeding. So clearly A is wrong. B says Germany has the world's highest expenditure on foreign aid. Germany has the world's highest. We don't know. Probably US has the world highest expenditure, which is not given. So Germany definitely has the highest in this table, but not in the world. South Korea and Belgium spend an equal proportion on GNI on foreign aid. Well, South Korea is spending 2.10 and Belgium is spending 2.10 or 2.10. Now that basically equal proportion basically means equal percentage, but South Korea has a higher GDP or GNI, so this means this is also wrong. They're spending an equal amount, not the equal proportion, so that's also something to consider. Sweden spent the highest proportion of GNI on foreign aid, and if you find out the percentage, that's 5 or 532, is probably the highest as compared to any other country. Because if you look at 5 over 532, let me get my calculator out. 7, 2, 3, 5 over that's 0.9% for Sweden, as compared to, if you look at Germany, it's 0.6%. So yeah, definitely D is the right answer in this case. Now in number 20, they say what would not be classified as structural unemployment. So structural unemployment happens because of a loss of sort of skills, or because of you being redundant due to a structural change in the economy, like for example loss of competitive advantage, or for example because of moving from manufacturing to services. If a country is structurally shifting away from agriculture to manufacturing, or manufacturing to services, that is going to lead to a loss of skills. So that's structural unemployment, right? So what would not be classified as that? The answer is C, a fruit picker who cannot find work in the winters, because that is seasonal unemployment. Okay, now a car worker who's replaced by a robot on the production line is structural change, because now we are going towards more manufacturing from a very labor intensive method. A coal miner whose mine closes because of the increased use of solar power is another structural change, because you're being replaced by technology. So A and B are kind of similar. A textile worker whose factory closes as production moves abroad is basically loss of competitive advantage. So that's why C is the right answer in this case, which is seasonal unemployment. In question number 21, this diagram shows the consumption function of a country. The consumption function is shifting upward. What would cause the consumption function to shift upward? Well, it's an exogenous change. Anything that can independently make consumption go up, like for example, consumer confidence go up, that will be the case. An increase in interest rates will make the consumption function go down. An increase in direct taxation will again make the consumption function go down, because people will be wary of spending. An increase in the proportion of income saved by household would mean a lot of savings are happening, which means consumption function will fall. The expectation of an increase in the rate of sales tax would make people spend now, then later when the sales tax go up. So D is the right answer. In number 22, they say accelerator principle refers to the relationship between investment and, guys, the accelerator principle says this, that there is a relationship between investment and changes in GDP. It's like your investment is alpha times your change in Y, where Y is your GDP. In question number 23, they are saying what is included in narrow money. Guys, narrow money is something which is liquid, which is your notes and coins, which is your current account deposit, and which is also banks' liquid assets at the central bank. So the right answer in this case, guys, will be A, which includes all of this, and not treasury bills, because treasury bills are not as liquid as your notes and coins and current accounts and bank liquid assets. You need to go and sell your treasury bill, which may make it a little less liquid. In question number 24, they say the diagram shows the three levels of the money supply and the three liquidity preference schedules. The initial money market equilibrium is point X, so where money supply meets money demand. We're looking at LP1 and MS2. The central bank purchases more government securities. So, guys, when the central bank is purchasing government securities, money supply goes up. Why? Because the government is the central bank is taking back government securities, so they will get the money, government securities, but money will be given to the economy in return. So money supply will go up, and therefore the answer in this case will be D, because with the same demand for money, money supply goes up. In number 25, they say what is the important assumption of monetarism. So monetarism is basically a school of thought which believes that money supply plays an important role, and therefore they believe in MV equals to PT. And according to the monetary theory of money supply, V and T are constant, which means velocity of circulation is stable or not changing. And that's why whenever money supply goes up, the price level goes up, which means there will be inflation in the economy. In 26, they say, according to the Keynesian theory, how will an increase in autonomous spending affects the value of the equilibrium income? Now, Keynesians are of the argument that change in Y is equal to multiplier times change in autonomous spending, or AE, aggregate expenditure. So, national income will increase by an amount more than, guys, than the increase in autonomous spending. So the right answer in this case for 26 will be B. Income will increase by greater amount, and that's because of the multiplier effect. In 27, they give two statements. The first statement saying the market economy is inherently unstable and the government must play a stabilizing role through monetary policy and fiscal policy. Well, that's what Keynesian economists believe. They believe in a strong role of government because they believe that there is what we call herd mentality, or basically animal spirit, where people just for reasons not logical, they end up spending too much or sometimes spending too little, and that can lead to recession or sometimes inflation, and that's why there's a very strong role of government to play. So that's why this statement is basically Keynesian statement. On the other hand, the economy will return to equilibrium rate of output and unemployment as a result of long run aggregate supply curve is vertical. The LRAS like this is basically the monetarist claim. So that's why B is the right answer. And by the way, classical also have a similar view in that context. So that's why monetarists and classical, they belong to a similar school of thought, because the classical school of thought is Adam Smith, and monetarists are strong believers of market forces of demand supply. In question number 28, they say the graph shows the percentage changes in money GDP and the consumer prices in a country between 2008 and 2010. You can see that the percentage change in GDP has always been positive, although the rate at which it's increasing is decreasing, but the rate has always been positive, or it's increasing at a decreasing rate, but the rate has always been positive, which means there is changes in money GDP, or GDP is always rising, probably later on at a slower rate, but it's still rising. Similarly, prices are also continuously rising at increasing rates. So the right answer in this case will be B, because money GDP and consumer prices both continue to rise. Remember, this is a very typical question wherever the percentages are positive and they could be increasing or decreases. This means the variable is still increasing. In question number 29, they say in an economy, the elasticity of demand for imported raw materials is zero point 0.3 and the elasticity demand for exports is 0.3. So both are inelastic, right? Now, the country is doing a depreciation. When you do depreciation, exports become cheaper and imports become expensive, right? But when the price of imports go up and the good is inelastic, the quantity, the revenue or expenditure on that good will go up. So change in cost push inflation or cost push inflation factors will cause inflation to actually increase, and the reason is simply because when you do depreciation, imports will become expensive, but if they are inelastic, the expenditure will also go up, which means cost push inflation will happen. At the same time, when you look at exports become cheaper and the good is inelastic, uh, that will also, if you look at it, will cause, when the price goes down, quantity will go up by much less because it's inelastic, and that in turn would also result in the expenditure, in this case now, to fall. So the expenditure will decrease. So when you are doing depreciation, remember depreciation will be successful if the Marshall Limit condition is true, which means the sum of the elasticity of exports and imports should be greater than 1. So C is the right answer. In number 30, they say which combination of macroeconomic policies will most likely be successful if the aim were to reduce unemployment and reduce inflation. So in this question, they're saying that macroeconomic policies would most likely be successful if you want to reduce unemployment and reduce inflation. And that's C and B, the expansionary supply side policies. And because when you do expansionary supply side policies, you are able to reduce inflation. Aggregate supply curve will shift to the right. If this is my LRAS, LRAS will shift to the right. LRAS1, this is my demand, aggregate demand. So you can see the price level to go down when you do successful supply side policies. Also, reducing indirect taxes basically would mean there will be lower cost of production, and that in turn would mean there will be higher quantity demanded or bought, and that could also lead to more more expenditure. Similarly, so this also can cause basically aggregate supply curve. So both of these policies are reducing our cost of production and therefore can result in GDP to go up and unemployment to go down. At the same time, control inflation. So B is the right answer.